everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, game masters, and enthusiasts like Josh and myself. I am, of course, Dan. With me, of course, is Josh.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back. We had a small hiatus, and before we get on to your emails, which everything today is going to be all quizzical, a major life event happened. None of us are happy about it, but I have to say that without Mary, Josh's wife, this podcast would not exist. Because
no, certainly
without Mary,
certainly not in the form that it does.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Mary, who I was with, my wife, I was with for just shy of 20 years, passed away due to complications of COVID-19 a couple of weeks back in mid-November. And it's been a rough couple of weeks. People who follow me on social media and so forth are aware of what was going on. And I am sort of finding my way back to a new normal.
Yeah.
And I certainly appreciate everybody's support and understanding and everything in the wake of that.
Yeah. Because I was hired, air quotes, hired. I was, I volunteered, I auditioned, per se, for the FOSSA open call back in 2014, 2013, somewhere in there. And I was assigned to this new game I'd never heard of called Demon World, and Mary was the line developer. And so I worked for Mary. I submitted things for Mary. And then I think you had a project that needed to be a quick pinch hit on. And so Mary said, well, Dan knows Earthdawn, so contact Dan. He'll fill in for you. And you asked me to do 2 pieces. I did 2 pieces. That was fine. But without Mary, you and I would not have this relationship back and forth predating the podcast to lean on to now create the podcast. So without Mary, this podcast would not exist in this form as we all know it.
That is accurate. So
yes,
raising a can of Coke Zero,
yes,
or whatever you happen to be drinking.
I otherwise would, but it would keep me up tonight. But otherwise, I'd drink that all day long.
But yeah,
yes.
So yeah, I will avoid the long rant about the utter failure of the federal government of the United States in
healthcare
all
response.
Of this.
Yeah.
The local thing here in Maine where I live, it's been pretty good. The folks at the hospital where Mary and I both worked, that was our day gig. Everybody local did everything that they can and have been wonderful and supportive, but this is the sort of this could have been avoided. This could have been avoided by a response, any response at a national level, rather than the denial and see, I'm going into it anyway. Rather than anybody who has been paying attention to the news is aware, I think, and I won't go into it more than that.
Mary will be missed by all those who knew and loved her, and that includes the 2 of us. No one more than you, no one more than the kids. So we have a podcast because of Mary. So Mary, this one's for you, even though you didn't actually ask us a question. A very, very brief little levity there. Sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah. Anyway, so let's get to the distraction, which is the podcast, and we can take your mind off of things for the next hour or so, and we can actually ask some Earthdawn-related questions from all the listeners who have nicely put up with my legendary recordings over the last 2 episodes we've released. All feedback is wonderful, good or bad. I don't care. I pinched hit again, so I'm okay with that. So first email comes in from Lee, who has some long-winded things to say, which is fine because I'm long-winded as well, as are all of us here. Hi guys, still tuning in. Well, that's good. Still enjoying the discussions and rambling. Thank you for the persistence. couple of random thoughts on what does a spirit want question that we posed, or someone else actually posed. So applicable to all spirits, a gift of karma. I don't think there's anything to argue with on that one.
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned that in response to one of the earlier questions we got on that, which is that karma just sort of as a representation of life force or magical energy that the spirit would want. It's nice and generic.
Exactly. On to his elementals. What elementals might want. It's pretty difficult for players to literally set the world on fire or drown it entirely under water. The easy option is a gift of true elemental energy appropriate to the elemental type. And the less easy option is to cause the closure of an opposed true element node.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
that's actually good if you're dealing with elementals. If you have kernels of a true element, those could be donated or could be something similar to karma, as it would perhaps be a way for the spirit to gain power. But yeah, also to do something that might cause the closure or destruction of a node of a rival or opposed element.
Yeah. And that could even be made like a small side quest. If you don't have one on you, then go find one and come back so you can lengthen the campaign that way.
Sure.
Onto like a beast spirit, what they might want. Rival dominance. For example, a rabbit spirit might give the shaman a single-use item to easily summon it again later, and then task them to locate an eagle, fox, or other rival spirit, defeat it, summon the rabbit spirit, and bind the defeated spirit in servitude to it for a year and a day.
That's an interesting idea. I kind of like that. It's
creative and yet specific. I appreciate both of those points. Also, maybe to provide food for a specific animal type for a set amount of time, as in, pay the rabbits in this warrant, feed them for like a month or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yep.
Again, the rabbit thing. I only say that because I have a couple of rabbits living in my backyard that anyone's welcome to come take. Or what a beast spirit might want is some animal type is being corrupted by a horror, go heal it or stop the corruption.
Yeah, that's something that would definitely be a bit more appropriate for a side quest or secondary goal. Like if you maybe if you prep it ahead of time, maybe have it as something that comes up. But unlike, say, karma or donation of true elements or, something basic that you can kind of come up with off the cuff, something where you've got, a situation with a horror having tainted or corrupted spirit would probably be something that would need a little bit more planning, and that you would need to kind of have an idea, even if you didn't necessarily know exactly when, but you could have an idea of how that might fit into your ongoing campaign in one way or another.
Yeah, fair enough. And then his last thoughts on the ally spirits and what they might want. It's lonely. You will talk to it for, 3 hours and 45 minutes, 3 times a week for 7 months, and then a week after that. So that's possible. Just keep it company, I suppose. Or perhaps it is curious, and each member of the party will read out their journal aloud in full to the spirit, which I think would just be fun for role-playing aspects, but that's just me. And then the area where it lives has become neglected, so therefore clean it, renovate it, bring it back up again, things like that. Sure. Or people don't live there anymore because of rumors, so convince some kind of populace or someone to come in, to move in and stay there and, put up shop, I guess. So, or maybe the ally spirit would like an interesting rock.
Rocks.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah. Those are
interesting rocks.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. Some of them are of varying complexity and involvement. You've got some that would be kind of fairly easy to deal with, and some that could provide their own sort of plot hook and adventure of their own. I think one of the important things to look at if you have player characters in your group that are going to be dealing with spirits is, as even if it's not necessarily specific for a given session, that you do some planning ahead and thinking about, with the types of spirits that they are likely to be dealing with, some things that you can come up with ahead of time to have ready to go in case something like that shows up. Yeah.
So, Lee, I want to come play in your game. That may not be a high compliment for you. That you think that might not be a high compliment for you, but it actually is. I would love to come play in your game. Those all sound very creative and are more than I would have been able to think of had I been given a week's time to do so. So I appreciate all of those suggestions. So on to Shane, and Shane is a double dipper this week. He actually sent us 2 emails. So the first of which is rather lengthy, but again, we got time, so we're all good. Thank you for hanging with us. Hello again. Thank you for addressing my cavalryman question on episode 43, which I have just gotten to today as I catch up. You both raised some interesting points, and I fully agree that without sacred cow slaughter, and I do like the sacred cows of Earth Dawn, that it is the discipline it is. It's just a shame it isn't as usable in more campaign styles. However, it leads me to a follow-up on arising from the points made about the idea of a path. And he prefaces this by saying he doesn't know what the paths look like in detail, as he didn't back that Kickstarter due to international shipping costs. But we'll go from there. With that in mind, instead of the idea of a path to replace the discipline to allow the cavalryman to be more applicable in other campaigns, a path that allows limited talent use in the mounted space for other disciplines would help make all mounted-style campaigns more feasible. Care would have to be given to preserve the cavalryman's niche in that case, but it merits thought, he thinks. So what would that look like? We'll get to the second part later.
Don't know what it would necessarily look like. I mean, I think that's probably a decent avenue to look at in terms of a horseman's path or something along those lines that would maybe give access to some talents or knacks or something like that were not otherwise available to anyone but the cavalryman. But yeah, that's something that you would want to be careful about what you give that path, because you wouldn't want to give it something that the cavalryman doesn't have.
Fair.
For the most part. Because obviously you don't want the path to potentially make a more effective cavalryman than the cavalryman. And you don't necessarily want to go giving, that path access to some things that are unique or strongly associated with the cavalryman adept. Mm-hmm. You might avoid giving access to like wheeling attack and wheeling defense. Wheeling attack especially, because that's one of the things that really boosts the cavalryman's offensive capability with charge and whatnot. I don't know. That would certainly be... I mean, it makes sense potentially that there would be something like that existed among some groups in Barsave or perhaps other parts of the world. Especially if you look at something like, the Scorcher bands or nomadic groups or whatever that are strongly associated with the cavalryman, there would potentially be adepts of other disciplines, and not necessarily everybody would be dual discipline in that regard. So, yeah, I think a path that would add some additional mounted capability onto other disciplines would be an interesting design space to explore. I don't, it might end up only being a minor path, just in terms of like limiting its potential power. Like I said, you wouldn't want to go and give them tricks that the cavalryman doesn't have.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to give them too much, compared to some of the special stuff for cavalrymen. So you might be looking at something that is just a minor path, which means that it's only up to like rank 5 and only gives access to a small selection of talents and useful knacks. But yeah, that's, that would... Yeah,
I wouldn't say they'd need a whole lot. I just like you said, a couple of ranks here and a couple of talent selections, and that's, I can't say enough, but again, not to be better than the cavalryman, just, the sidecar to the motorcycle. Mm-hmm. Type that one. Second part of his email is Shane has a bunch of questions for me specifically. He's about to start an Earth Dawn 4 game for my wife and teenagers. As someone who has recently played 4th edition for the first time, but has played plenty of 1st edition, what are Dan's experiences of them in play in terms of differences? And what are your tips for someone crossing editions? Which is my tips are always read your character sheet, know what you can do, and how everything you have works. That's my period. And any game, anywhere, anytime.
Even, especially if you're crossing editions, even if you think you know what it does, double check.
Yes.
Because there are things that have changed, and maybe not dramatically, but enough that, you
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the end of the world if you use an earlier version of a talent or something in accident.
And you remember it the way it used to be, not the way it is now.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
we've done that a lot.
I've mentioned my own experience with, and I'm in a situation where not only do I have the various edition versions in my head, I've also got the iterations that some of the stuff went through in the development of fourth. So I've got not just like the maybe the 3 or 4 different variations of some talents. In some cases, it's like 7 or 8 or whatever.
The ones that never saw print are still rattling around in your brain pan. We had this idea for this one, and that's not the way it went. Never mind. I shouldn't say that out loud. Yeah, stuff like that. What things tripped up my GM on the change? And that was his expectation of what the circles of our characters could do, and what kind of challenge level to throw at us was some figuring out on his part. As far as he's like, I thought these guys would be easy and they almost killed us. And then the next session we sat there and he's like, I thought these things would be hard. And we wiped the floor with them in like 2 rounds. And so he was having trouble figuring out exactly the right level to throw at us, because with the exploding dice, as Earthdawn's always had, but the success levels varied things a lot for him. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those, your success levels are stupidly high. And okay, then. So we get to roll, different damage dice. And he's like, and that's where I lost all my stuff. So for him to figure out where that level was a little hard to do. But then he found the chart that we've talked about before, where you figure out the challenge level based upon all the character stats. And you kind of go with that. And then he's also thrown a couple of masks on some things. And so that, leveled things out as well. So it took him a while, a little balancing act, some finagling, but he got that down. So the other thing I will say, as somebody who's recently played fourth for the first time, but my differences are this, really. The setting hasn't changed a whole lot. The timeline's been forwarded, so that's not too different. The success levels take some getting used to. The talents and spells, to Josh's point, have been tweaked or changed. So ranges might be different. Durations might be different. The extra threads, there's a whole new wrinkle in there. I've not played a spellcaster yet, but I got one friend of mine, a player, who's working on the spellcasting part, and he's having a hard time with the changes in spells. But otherwise, the thing that was fun for me to get used to was, I don't have to be stingy with my karma anymore. And we got into trouble where one of the character playing alongside me was having a real hard time, and he started getting hit really bad and his wounds started stacking up. And so I'm like, okay, all bets are off. I'm putting karma on every single action I'm doing. And that saved our bacon. So I'm not going to lie. So that was the difference is, okay, I used to be sparing with my karma and I don't have to be anymore. Mm-hmm. And that took some getting used to for me as the player. So that's pretty much my thoughts on that one. So
yeah,
Shane, thank you for the first email.
If you're coming from first edition, the thing that you need to sort of get a handle on with karma is that while you short term, you don't necessarily have as much to draw on, especially at lower circles. Long term, because there's no daily limit, like you get X basically per day. You get however many points you have per day, and there's no spending for them. It's just kind of a pool that refreshes daily. And so short term, you might not have as much to draw on as you did in previous editions, particularly first or second.
Yeah, first couple circles are a little light.
A little light. But long term, you don't necessarily need to worry about, but we might be at diving into that care in 2 days. I better save my karma now so that I have it for that. You can spend your karma today and not have to worry so much about those resources for tomorrow. It does, in some respects, step away a little bit from some of the original metaphysics of how things were supposed to work. Mm-hmm. But I have found that it's a little bit more gameable
Yeah, I will say my entire party, as we get our points, we're like, it is so much more fun not to have to allocate points for my karma pool for the next, 2 or 3 adventures until I can raise it up again. And so we're like, hey, I could just spend the points on talents or things like that. I don't have to set aside 200 points for my karma pool just to sit there and take those down every time I do a karma ritual and get more karma that day. We love that part. So that took some getting used to as well to go, oh, look. And that, believe me, it wasn't a long getting used to. We're like, oh, after 2 sessions, we're like, yeah, we like this part. We like this part of the game. Not having to allocate points to just hang on to karma for a while. So that was the best part. So otherwise, a couple things, but you'll get used to it. And then the fun part for me was going back and running an Earthdawn Classic campaign. And I was like, wow, okay, this is not the success levels anymore. It's still the armor defeating hits and so forth and so on. And it didn't feel clunky. It didn't feel like an old warm blanket to go back to. It was one of those, okay, and this is different, and we're getting used to this again. And that's a little hard to, I played 4th edition on Sunday and I ran Classic on Wednesday. And so that 3 days difference was one of those, okay, I need to wrap my headspace around just the slight difference in mechanics. And that was pretty much it. So, and building your character is more versatile in 4th edition. I'll say that.
Yes.
That was the fun part is it was more versatile just to say I get this one automatic, but I get to choose the other one I want always. And that was a different feel to get used to as well. But again, enjoying it, absolutely enjoying all the changes to 4th edition. So if I remember when D&D went to 3rd edition, they actually put out a guide. Hey, here's your AD&D character from AD&D 2nd to port them into 3rd with these rules. Do that. And I was like, that's a nice little booklet to have. I still have that booklet, but I can't imagine. Josh is shaking his head like, oh, for the love of Pete. No.
I know what they were trying to do with that, but it was my feelings on the effectiveness of that. I am more of the opinion of, rather than trying to do a conversion in that regard, just, I mean, you're sort of just like, it was fine.
It was a thing.
It wasn't, yeah, it was a thing.
But it's not Earthdawn. We're okay.
It's fine.
So, Shane's second email, 2 emails in 1 week. Crazy. So the episode 46 name question from Doomsy made me think there was one other element that neither Dan nor Josh mentioned that needs consideration. Names are often cultural, and Josh has mentioned a few times that Earthdawn doesn't typically have monocultures by race. Therefore, name variation is likely to be more within a race than is typical in fantasy. The names of Throlic elves should probably have more in common with the names of Throlic dwarves than they do with the names of elves from Cathay, for example. And Shane imagines Obsidian and Tiskrang names, at least true names, not nicknames, are more likely to be semi-consistent due to the early life rocks in Europogoi. Likewise, those elves linked strongly with the elven kingdoms might also have similar names across geography, but otherwise, I say embrace the variety of names to support the non-monoculture setting. Yes. Is Shane off the mark on that process?
No, I don't think Shane is off the mark with that at all. I think that's actually a very good point, that at least in that, aside from Obsidian, the Tiskrang, which tend to be a little bit more their own thing. Where they mix with other name givers, but their culture tends to be a little bit more pure. Like, yeah, if you know what I mean. Isolated. I don't mean that in a bad way. Well, not isolated is not the right word, but they, it's because they have a very different biology, because they are egg laying. They're oviparous, as opposed to the more sort of traditional human mammalian thing that most of the name givers are. They have their own strong, like the Tiskrang culture is so strongly identified with the river and the crew covenants and Europogoi and things like that their naming conventions and so forth are apt to be more consistent than you would see even in villages out in the plains, because you would still have a mix of name giver races and the traditions, especially after centuries of those communities largely being together during the Scourge, you could see like a real melting pot or melange of naming conventions and different styles depending on the history of that community.
Yeah, and the Scrying really are raised by a village.
Yeah.
Versus like an individual family unit. They are more of a collective operating family that way. So I would, and their names are borrowed and inherited and parsed and so forth and so on. So yeah, they'd be a little bit different. I just know that the previous writers of Earthdawn didn't place a very big emphasis on it. And so
Right.
it would be nice to eventually shoehorn that or corral it, make it gel a little bit into a form or a structure. But I also love the fact that, just name your character. Go for it. It's fun to do without any set kind of rules for things like that. So I've come across name generators online and I'm kind of like, yep, that's not an Earthdawn type name. I just tend to know it.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things. I've read enough of this stuff. So, Shane, thank you for the twofer. Love the double shot of emails. Appreciate all your thoughts. Loving all of them so far. And Leah's you as well. So this one's from Jesse, a.k.a. Falal Katan Vross. Hey, fellas. He thinks we're fellas. I think during the Sky Raider episode, when you were discussing second weapon as a talent option, you noted that it pairs well with momentum attack because it could be triggered off by the primary attack with melee weapons as well as the secondary second weapon test. However, momentum attack says it can only be used once per round. Is there an errata for the player's guide that I missed? If not, it sounds like a ripe candidate for a knack.
If it actually says in the rule book, in the player's guide, that it can only be used once per round, then that is what it should be. This is probably a case of previous editions blurring together in my head, because I don't think momentum attack had that limit previously. I think in earlier editions it could be triggered off of any appropriate result from an attack, whether that was second attack or second weapon or anything like that. So if that's what it says in the book, and we're looking that up right now.
Literally the last line of momentum attack, page 159. This talent can only be used once per round.
So there's not errata on that. That is my brain misremembering. Having it be a decently high ranking knack isn't a bad idea if you want to get around it. I mean, it might be one of those knacks where you not only need a rank of a certain level in momentum attack, but maybe it also has an additional requirement where you need, say, second weapon at a certain rank in order to be able to use it an additional time on second weapon. The thing about momentum attack is that, let's say you were doing your primary melee weapons attack and you didn't roll high enough to trigger momentum attack. You could then use momentum attack for its normal once per round use on a second weapon or a second attack test that did meet those criteria. The limitation is just simply that you can't use momentum attack more than once. And I think part of that is just simply to limit the number of attacks that you can make, because melee types tend to get a lot of attacks as it is, and allowing especially momentum attack that becomes multiplicatively more powerful if you are able to use it multiple times in a round, which is why the limitation is there, when you think about it. That basically it adds the potential to add one additional attack per round. If it could trigger off of any attack, then suddenly if you've got melee weapon, second weapon, and second attack, each of which can trigger them, then you're no longer looking at potentially 6 attacks if you're rolling consistently high enough to allow a momentum attack off of each of those. And that just starts to get a little crazy and starts to tread onto the ground that is reserved for the true multi-attack talents like multi-shot, multi-attack, multi-charge, where you are able to just straight as it is make multiple attacks in a round, similar to Claw Frenzy, that sort of thing. Those are all Warden and Master tier talents. No, the Momentum attack is only once per round because I have like 40 different versions of stuff in my head.
Fair enough. So thank you, Falal-Katan Vros. We loved hearing from you. Please get us some more. On to Masej, who is from Poland, and give us a long one email as well. And then I think we have a surprise email at the end, which is voicemail. So very fun. So good day. I'm Masej from Poland. You can spell it as magic. And after approximately 6 months, I have just completed the whole list of episodes, culminating with the 51st of the Earthdawn Survival Guide. First, let me say thank you. It has been a wonderful journey, especially when you delve into details of the Earthdawn lore, such as history, culture, and legends. He hasn't actually heard the last 2 that we posted for just the legends, but those were fillers. I think the background of Barsave is what makes this RPG special, certainly better than D&D, his opinion, as it gives us much information which eventually sharpens our imagination. Well done. I have myself been running a first edition game set in the province of Vivane for the past 6 years. What caught my attention was a thing you mentioned many episodes ago about some mysterious deposit of orichalcum, which is located beneath the city of Vivane. Now, obviously, I have at my disposal only some of the books from first edition and the 4th edition player's guide, and I have never heard of this issue. Thus, this revelation intrigues me, and I would like to know more about it. Why have the Therans created this deposit, and is it in any way connected with the Scourge? I remember reading about a similar thing on the island of Thera. If there is any source book dedicated to this topic, and I would be very grateful for any recommendation and whatnot. Was it finally revealed why the Scourge stopped earlier than planned? Especially relating to those devices placed in cares which were supposed to track the course of the Scourge and the ball that stopped approximately 2 to 3 centimeters above the bowl. Again, any sources, he'd be happy to read more. So we got 2 major questions from him there.
Yeah,
so let's talk about the orichalcum. And
a lot of this info is not in any published source book. A lot of that orichalcum deposit under Vivane thing is revealed in a couple of places. Well, revealed in the original outline / proposal for Barsave at War. You know, the one that was sort of had been put together at that point prior to the first edition line getting shuttered back in the late 90s.
Yes.
And it's that document coupled with things that Lou Prosperi, the original line developer, had talked about online and things like that. It's possible, although I don't think so. I haven't read the material in it in quite a while. It's possible there might be some hints in the Vivane and Skypoint boxed set from first edition, but I don't actually think there's anything that really got mentioned in there.
That is the one thing from Earthdawn I've actually never read. I was hoping to hand that up to somebody to actually play it, to run it and run me through it. So I didn't read it on purpose.
Yeah, I have like flipped through stuff occasionally when looking up looking for particular pieces of information, but I have not really read that box set in quite a while.
Fair.
So it's possible there may be references in there that I don't remember that might hint at it. But basically, the orichalcum deposit under Vivane. Oh, it's also kind of referenced, and I couldn't exactly point you to the book, but it's also kind of referenced in some late 2nd edition Shadowrun or maybe early 3rd edition Shadowrun. From around that same period, the very tail end of FASA's run with the game, because of cross-pollination and ideas and things like that. So it's possible that some of the stuff kind of ties into that as well. So under Vivane and in several other places around the world, and on Great Thera, the island of Thera itself as well, a lot of the orichalcum, or so this sort of information is, a lot of the orichalcum was used to create magical artifacts called loci, singular locus. Rumor has it that there was possibly one that was under what is the present day wastes, and that may be connected with why they are the way they are, although that is not something that we have left as anything more than a rumor. But they're in various places, and the idea behind them, and this is part of the reason why Thera was so interested in having as much orichalcum as they could possibly get, before the Scourge, was basically to create a massive network of basically a magical network that had these loci as various like points on it that would artificially maintain the magic level, basically to stop the magic level from dropping. So it's high enough that they still have their magical power and their magical dominance, but not so high that the horrors, broadly speaking, are able to be around anymore.
Yeah.
And this is all like, you know, like true heaven herds, like immortal elf dragon stuff. Like this is the deep, one of the deep secret mysteries of the setting that really drives like the broader conflict between various powers, but isn't something that is likely to become important at the typical player level campaign sort of thing. And, remembering, sort of understanding again that part of the reason that Thera was founded was because there was a faction of immortal elves that basically wanted to control the world. And so they took their knowledge of the Scourge and found, and of the coming Scourge and the horrors, and they created a cover story for how they came about this information and basically founded a magical empire, the long-term goal of which, something that plays out over the course of centuries or millennia, because they're immortals, they can plan that long, was to basically control the world. And, part of that was get a whole bunch of easily enchantable magical material, orichalcum, and seed large concentrations of it in important places around the world to artificially maintain the magic level so that they could maintain their dominance and essentially run a magical empire that will last forever.
Yeah. Somehow manipulating things to keep yourself in power for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Who does that?
And of course, it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. And if you think of where the magic level is and where it should be in the course of the centuries that it rises and falls, the millennia, the 5,000 or so years that a typical magic cycle goes, that the longer the magic level is artificially maintained, higher than it should be, you're basically putting a whole lot of potential, like imagine an elastic band stretching between, I'm showing Dan in the camera here, like my fingers are pulling apart, but imagine an elastic band that is basically stretching and stretching and stretching. At some point, that's going to snap.
It's going to be
and when that happens, hey, look, the island of Thera basically explodes and the magic level very, very quickly descends to where it should be, and there is a huge magic cataclysm that basically obliterates a whole ton of evidence of this civilization having existed at all in the past and only remembered as Atlantis, sort of in the present day. Like that was the idea, sort of the big, deep, long term. And again, it's not like this is a thing that is imminently going to happen. It's more like the centuries or whatever down the road, this is the eventual fate of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Theoretically, and this is the part where I just start getting into conjecture stuff based on things like, for example, in the Dragons source book, some of the stuff that Vastenjas talked about with regards to dragons, particularly with regards to ritual magic, and one possible interpretation of the dragon's origin myth and how that ties into Vergigorm and not All Wings, the first dragon, Night Slayer, Night Weaver, something like that. I don't have that story right in front of me. But like that origin myth is a version of what maybe the dragons had done in the first place, and maybe possibly that the whole reason that there are magic cycles now to begin with is that the dragons did some super powerful ritual to banish the horrors, to like drive them out from the world, and that unfortunately caused a problem where now the magic cycles are going up and down, and they're they go into hibernation during the low cycle because there's not enough magic to otherwise sustain. Like that's all me. That is like super conjecture based on various stuff.
But I can
and that
see
part
that.
of the reason, that part of the reason why we're talking about not even the Age of Dragons, we're talking about like maybe even before that, so that when we get into the creation of the immortal elves and whatnot, that part of the reason that the immortal elves and the dragons don't get along, particularly in the Theron era, in the Age of Legend, the Fourth World, is that the immortal elves, at least the Theron faction who want to dominate the world magically, are kind of doing a similar thing to what the dragons may have done in the past, and the dragons understand what a big deal that is and know that, as Vaz and Jess said, dragons have ritual magic. We just really, really rarely break it out because
we know what it can do.
We know what it can do. When the dragons break out the ritual magic, you get Stormhead being brought down on Vivane. You get that kind of thing.
We know what the nuclear bomb can do, which is why we don't use it.
Yeah. But the possibility that maybe the whole magic cycle thing is a result of a powerful dragon magic ritual gone awry, and the consequences of that meant that it put them into hibernation, where they were now potentially they were vulnerable to their servants who would not be able to, who were not forced into hibernation during the low magic cycle. But the Theron marker of the elemental air, or elemental earth over the elemental water in the enchantment, that elemental clock thing, is not connected in terms of why the scourge, why the magic level stopped going down. It just indicated that it was. Scholars in Thrall theorized that maybe the Therons either didn't tell the complete truth or intentionally designed that to not actually indicate the safety of what was going on in terms of the magic level, because they wanted to have the opportunity to go out and retake the world in the face of greatly reduced opposition at the tail end of the Scourge, which is why Thrall kind of opened their gates early and started poking around, because they didn't necessarily trust what the Therons had told them with regards to the Books of Harrow and the Scourge and the magic cycle and all that sort of thing.
Fair. So his question was really, was it finally revealed somewhere in print why the Scourge stopped earlier than planned? So can he go look that up somewhere to reference that? I'm assuming.
No, maybe if you are good at Google search magic, you might be able to find old interviews or discussions or that sort of thing with Lou Prosperi, where some of that was revealed. But in terms of official published material,
canon,
not in any edition that I'm aware of as to what that was. It was more we know that the magic level stopped. We know that
it's leveled out. Yeah.
We know that it's leveled out. When we got the Theron Empire book, we learned about the 3 gigantic orichalcum pillars there on Great Thera. The outline / proposal for Barsave at War talked about the locus under Vivane and what happened, with the Theron magicians tapping into its power in the battle at Sky Point at the tail end of the Second War, and also how that affected Stormhead and things like that. That was something that was sort of in the initial outline and proposal for that big final battle, and it was just kind of a matter of, at the time that came out, Lou being asked questions by fans on email lists and whatnot, and his answers to those.
Fair. So, thank you, message from Poland. We love the discussion you brought in. Sorry you don't have all the books. The collectors, like myself, who've gone into debt to get them all. I don't advise that, but eventually I got dug out of the debt, so I'm okay there now. But otherwise, the more you can get your hands on to read, the better you can, and PDFs are always available as well, so they're probably a little bit cheaper. And I think Josh has mentioned a number of times, the Fawcett Games web store has everything, including the Yurthon journals, by the way, everything in PDF.
All of the for every edition that was like all of the books, first, second, classic, third, fourth, journals, all of those are available online, both at our web shop and Drive-Thru RPG as well.
Yeah.
I think everything's at Drive-Thru at this point.
I think so. I want to say so. I'm not sure I've seen the journals there, but I haven't looked for the journals because I have them in print, actually. So we got a last email. Actually, got a voicemail from Tristan. Yep. And if I can figure out a way to actually import that, I will import that into this file. And so people can actually hear Tristan say...
I just want to say, great podcast. Particularly agree with Josh's take on The Quick and the Dead being an underrated Leonardo DiCaprio film. Slightly off topic, but after Basketball Diary, probably his second greatest performance. Anyway, loving the specials. Keep it up. Thanks. Bye.
He had a comment, and then he actually mentioned that he's enjoying the specials, which I will take the feedback on that as positive. So,
just a brief little voice. That is something, by the way, that is available to anybody if you want to take advantage of it. You just go to the anchor.fm site. Like if you follow the link that I tweet out, that's the direct link to the episode, somewhere in there, there's a link where you can actually record your own voice message and leave that if you want to. Much like with our emails, if you want to do that, but you don't want it to be included in the show, then just feel free to mention that. But we'll drop that in here at the tail end. It's not that long. But it was nice. It's not something that we had advertised, but I had turned it on as a feature when we set up the podcast when I was setting everything up beforehand.
So Tristan, it was 1,000 legend points to you for being our very first voicemail after 50 plus episodes. 1,000 points to you, sir.
Oh,
I'm going to take that as a win. So otherwise, folks, if you want to contact us with your emails or support for Josh, please feel free to do so at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. 53 in the bag.
There we go.
Any final thoughts, Josh?
2020 can't be over soon enough.
2020, the year 2020 is the longest decade on record. And I thought 2016 sucked, and it did, by the way. But 2020, it kind of takes the cake right now. So, yeah. I lost my brother in 2016. Josh lost his wife in 2020. We have both been hit by tragedy along the way. My tragedy shuttered my first podcast, but this one's going to keep going as long as Josh wants it to go on. So, Josh, I thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
On behalf of every listener we have, I am sorry. But we'll life must go on and the show must go on. So here we are. Here's the show. Otherwise, folks, we'll catch you in a week or so. We'll get out the episodes as often as we possibly can. Hopefully no other tragedy befalls us because I can record more legends. There's 40 odd to get through, but I don't necessarily have to. I will, if threatened. I will threaten again. I will. But otherwise, folks, thank you for listening. Now, everyone, it's time for you to go make your own legend.
Have a good night, everybody.